Hello, folks, and welcome to Author Adjacent, a podcast about the journey from hobbyist writer to professional author. I'm your host, Michael Vadney, and for today's episode, I have another author interview. I'm sitting here with Joseph John Lee, author of the Spellbinders and Gunslingers trilogy, and now his latest work, Upscaled. Welcome to the show, Joe.
Thanks, Michael. Thanks for having me on. Happy to be here.
Of course. So, as always, I like to start with this first question. I've already warned you for it. How did you get to where you are at as an author today? Like, where did your journey begin, and what were all the steps?
Yeah, so there's a lot of steps. It's a very non-linear journey, kind of like my storytelling. It's very non-linear.
And a test.
So originally, my career of choice, I was actually planning to go into academia. So I spent about 8 years pursuing what was ultimately going to be a PhD in history. About around year 8, I had a massive burnout. Realized that, maybe the reason I'm not getting too much out of this is because I secretly hated it all this time. So maybe I shouldn't do this. And what actually kind of opened my eyes a bit was a course I was taking on the Hindu epics of the Mahabharata and the Ramayana. Coincidentally, is what opened my eyes to saying, hey, this one career is kind of the pits. I'd rather do this other thing because I'm having so much more fun breaking down these huge, prolific religious narratives. And after that, I kind of just started pursuing creative writing from there, and was much happier for it. There's been and I've always kind of had like the knack for making stories ever since I was young. I've been fiddling with different plot lines for different things for like on and off since about high school or so. And it wasn't really until around 2018 that I really started actually actively pursue creative writing. Wrote a few novellas, wrote a couple novels, and then eventually around 2020, I started working on the Spellbinders and the Gunslingers trilogy, what wound up being my debut, The Bleeding Stone. I finished the trilogy this year. The final entry came out in June, and then I decided after writing super depressing, dark historical fantasy, I took a hard left turn and wrote a cozy comedic fantasy about a girl finding a newborn dragon wanting to throw a birthday party for him. So, and that's what Upscaled is. So, it's been an interesting journey for sure.
That is definitely a twist in career choice, and I do have questions concerning that. First, I do want to get into though. So you mentioned you wrote a few novellas and a few novels before you got to The Bleeding Stone. What was it about The Bleeding Stone that really went, okay, this is the one? Like, what made it different than all of your previous work to decide to finally take this over the finish line?
So when I was writing those novellas, it was kind of basically kind of almost like self-instruction on like really how to like plot out a book, how to set up character arcs and all, and basically it was just me kind of learning on the fly how to become a writer, like how to like be a good writer, I should say. And it was kind of set up for a series that I had been thinking about since I was about 14 or 15, and they were just like prequel novellas leading into this, and I actually started writing basically a prototype version, I guess. I don't know how better to put it, of that series, and I had fully outlined the first book in that series around like 2018, and started actually like getting into it in 2020. Wrote the first 70,000 words of it, but then I started to think more about what would become The Bleeding Stone, what would become the Spellbinders and the Gunslingers, that whole series. And the more I thought about this other book that I was working on, the more that I was really coming to realize I wasn't quite ready to tackle something of that scale, because I knew that would be a series of like big, hefty books, and I knew it was a lot to take on. It was going to be definitely a real challenge to do the first time out. And I had written another novel the previous year, back in 2019, that was a bit smaller scale, by like 90,000 words or so. But The Bleeding Stone, like just like thematically, it was something that was really speaking to me at the time. And I know you've read The Bleeding Stone, and just like the different themes that were rampant, that were really things that were becoming very big conversation points when I started writing it in 2020. With especially with like historical erasure, people of color, how they're treated, historical education, especially with regards to with these, like the seedier parts of the country's history. Those were all things that like accidentally I was already in the process of writing it, but then it just kind of accidentally became things we were all talking about later that year anyway. And I felt that was just kind of like a contribution I was making to that conversation. And, that was really just what held my attention for a few years. And yeah, and it was, and at the same time where the previous series I kind of just nixed was a bit beefy. This was like kind of like the perfect middle ground of writing something that wasn't too short, but still it was like a full trilogy. The practice of charting out and finishing an entire series was definitely a good stepping stone to basically eventually venturing back to that other series that I started and just kind of put to the side.
Yeah. Do you think you'll ever come back to that series that you put to the side? Is it like the epic one that you want to build out someday, but you're not quite ready?
That is actually what I'm charting out now. So I've been working on like all the different, just basically the lore of every, like the world building. That's what I'm trying to get to. All the world building. I've been basically just like kind of jotting stuff down for the better part of the last month or so. I'm hoping to get all of that sorted. Basically, I'm just going to be outlining the entire series, and then hopefully getting into the first book, probably by the end of the year, and hopefully having the first book out around the end of next year, beginning of 2026.
Oh, that's very exciting. Yeah, your books have very complex and very deep world building within them. It's a lot like when you're eating a very like complex dessert, is you are just the reader just given this dessert and you're like, yes, this is delicious. I know there's chocolate, I know there's caramel, but from the flavors of it, there's a lot more complexity going on here, but you also don't give away the recipe. Like you don't overload them with, yes, there's 10 grams of sugar and all this salt and all these other things. It's enough to get the reader entrenched into the story that you're telling without loading them. And honestly, I was really impressed with that when I read The Bleeding Stone. So looking forward to the world building of this new one.
I appreciate that. Because like you said, you don't want to like overload them too much. It's finding that right balance of, okay, you want to still explain some part of what's going on in here. And I know that's, for example, like I've been jumping on the Malazan train the last few months, and like that series is obviously notorious for explaining that's like fuck all to you, and you just have to figure it out as you go. And I mean that's something that appeals to me because like I like kind of that discovery because it kind of goes into my background of it's like my education as a historian, but I know that it's not really something for everybody, so I want to kind of find that happy medium of leaving the breadcrumb trail. Okay, you're going to pick up some things here and there, but you're not going to be totally lost along the way and still leaving you a map.
Yeah. You're just leaving certain parts of the map blank, but there's a lot of things around the blank space that you can be like, this is probably what's here. You can probably figure it out.
Yeah, or sometimes like, hey, I led you astray. That was a wrong turn. Why did I put it on the map? Don't worry about it. We'll figure that out. Figure it out in post.
Yeah. Yes, there's definitely been a big rise in the Malazan, especially like on social medias right now, where everyone's talking about it a lot again. And I know it like comes around kind of like cyclically, and eventually I'm gonna jump on that train, but I haven't bitten the bullet on that one quite yet.
Yeah, I think what really drove me to it was just the broken binding editions that are that have come out. I'm getting
Oh
my
yeah.
set. I'm getting my set of the first three. I think I'm in the batch that gets sent in December. So
Ooh.
I was like, Felix Ortiz did the covers. Like I've worked with him. I'm good friends with him. So I was just like, okay,
Yeah, he did the cover of your trilogy, right?
yes, he did. And just like really any excuse to have more of his artwork on my shelves is okay with me.
No, 100%. No, that is fantastic. So this other book that you wrote even before this one, is that just like a trunk novel, or do you think we'll see something from it someday?
Possibly someday. So it's like an urban fantasy novel that kind of a cross between Neverwhere by Neil Gaiman and the Netflix series Sense8.
Yeah.
And so it was something that I had fun writing. I was pitching it to agents because I thought there might be some appeal there. There was nothing there really, but I have, and since that it's just kind of sat in the bin for the last about 5 years or so. I was
Yeah.
originally planning to kind of rework it this year, release it toward the end of the year, but then just like some financial snafus popped up this year that like led me to table it for now. I probably will revisit it in the future, but for now, just other projects have my full attention. So that'll be something more when I need a break from bigger things. I just think, okay, maybe I'll just jump into this and just really kind of show off more range. He writes depressing fantasy. He writes cute things with dragons. He writes a weird urban fantasy. He's got range.
Why not? So you wrote your first trilogy, which is like a darker, harder fantasy, and kind of like your love letter to your frustrations with history as it's recorded. And then how did you end up switching like almost a full 180 then to Upscale, which, as you were saying, is about a little girl throwing a birthday party for a dragon that she found?
Yeah, I more than anything, like the like emotional damage is definitely the moniker that's been attributed to Spellbinders series, not just for the reader, but it was for me personally too. Like right when working on that for about about 4 years, when I started the first book to when I released the final book, and writing that depressing shit really takes a toll on you after a while. So
Oh yeah.
I needed a full mental reset. I needed something light and fun, just a nice palate cleanser for myself. And around when I finished the first draft of the Legion of the Lost, the final book in the Spellbinders series, I was thinking more and more about how I really wanted to write something that my niece and nephew could enjoy. My niece and nephew are 11 and 8 respectively. And the Spellbinders series is very much not for them. That is
Absolutely not.
well outside what they'd be able to understand, enjoy. So I wanted to scale it back a bit, and just have something light, fun, cheerful, and basically that's just kind of where this like the story of Upscaled and like this what's currently just a duology, how that just kind of came to be. So the main character in Upscaled is like loosely based on my niece, and various members of my family are like represented in Upscaled and the forthcoming sequels. So my sister is obviously their mother in the book. My niece and nephew are both represented in the book. I'm in there. I'm just I have almost said, yeah, it's an awkward representation of myself, but at the same time I'm also really awkward anyway. So it's just like a lore accurate representation of myself.
Well, you're fooling me so far.
My wife is represented in it. One of my friends asked that I write him as just a gnome, so I made him an extremely belligerent gnome. And then my parents are going to be represented in the second book. So it was a fun way, just kind of where the Spellbinder series was kind of like a vocalization of like personal frustrations, this like the Dragons of Nora series is really just almost like a gift for my niece and my nephew, like something that they will enjoy, but also that my family can enjoy too, because they'll recognize, oh, they're all in this too. So
That is a very heartwarming reason to write a book. I absolutely love that.
yeah. So it was and it was an incredibly fun book to write. So I wrote basically the entire first draft. I wrote it back in February, just because it was
Oh, wow.
I was just in one of those like witty, sarcastic moods for a full month, and it just kind of flowed naturally that entire month. It was a lot of fun to write.
That's absolutely excellent. Do you have a lot of experience like taking people in real life and like making them into characters? Is that something you've often done with stories, or is this kind of the first time you've really leaned into that as hard as you did?
As far as people that I personally know, so the urban fantasy that I wrote about 5 years back, there were I not like 1-to-1 representations of people that I know, but more just kind of like caricatures or inspirations of people that I know
Yeah.
who were represented a little bit in that book. And then like the Spellbinder series, there was it was more just kind of like historical representation of certain people. Like the main antagonist in the series is just a Christopher Columbus stand-in. And but Upscaled was like the first book that I really just kind of did almost basically it's like all near 1-to-1 like caricatures of like my friends and family just put into a book. I more fictionalize it.
No, that's actually really cool. So you wrote this mostly for your niece and nephew. Does that mean the Upscaled book would be qualified as like middle grade then?
Yeah, it's like probably like I've seen it I think described as either middle grade or YA. But there's still I wrote it with the intention that adults could enjoy it too. There's plenty of humor in it that kids might not fully get, but adults will. It's kind of like Rocko's Modern Life, but without all the dick jokes. So like it has like kind of like the Monty Python absurdism that adults would probably appreciate a bit more. And yeah, just like different pop culture references as well. Whenever I needed a joke to fill in some space, it's like, I don't know, I'll throw in a Futurama reference here or something.
Oh, I wouldn't be mad about a Futurama references. But no, when you're describing that as like it's for kids, but there's a lot of adult humor that kind of goes over their head. Immediately, I thought of the original Shrek. Watching that as a child and then rewatching that as an adult, I'm like, oh, there's so much here that I did not pick up on. So it sounds like Upscaled is a lot of like that.
Yeah, I think Shrek is definitely a good comparison in that regard for sure.
Excellent. Did you have any kind of difficulty switching between this like harder, darker, almost grim, dark fantasy to a cozy fantasy?
I think I had enough separation from when I finished writing The Legion of the Lost to when I started working on Upscaled that it wasn't it was easier to kind of flip the switch at that point. I think by the time I started actually writing Upscaled, I was probably about a month removed from doing my final edits on Legion, and then also probably about 6 months from when I finished the first draft of Legion. So there was plenty of time to just kind of not be in like a grim, dark writing mood and just to be able to get fully in with a more cozy, sarcastic mood. So and I think, and there's also like part of like there were parts of the Spellbinder series that kind of had a little bit of a sarcastic tone, especially in the dialogue. And that was something that I kind of picked up. Like Joe Abercrombie is a big influence for me, and he has such a like sardonic wit with his books that they're grim and heavy, but they're also funny because he's just like a genuinely funny guy. It's just like very dark humor. It was kind of almost like a half step in that direction already. And then I just took the full step into just full comedy when I really jumped into Upscaled. Upscaled. So it wasn't as difficult as you might think. If it was going like full depressing, like heavy, grimdark, I think it would have been a different story for sure.
Mm-hmm. No, I would definitely say, like, we mentioned the world building before, but dialogue and just characters in general are definitely strong suits that I have noticed in your stories, and very impressed with the way people talk about these like very difficult things, but then do have those like witty, sarcastic moments that kind of like, yeah, this is a really horrible thing that's happening right now, but you kind of have to laugh at it because otherwise you're going to cry.
Right. Yeah. And I think that's just kind of like my approach to life is like you gotta find the humor in some things because otherwise it's there's a lot of shit in the world right now, especially in recent years, and you got to find some way to laugh somehow. And if I can help people find like some levity even in like darker subject matters, like it's kind of the balance of knowing when to laugh and knowing when to be serious. And that's a so it's a fun line to toe. It's a difficult line to toe, but it's still fun.
No, I agree. I think is it Joss Whedon that did like Firefly, Buffy, and all that? Is that the right name?
Yeah. Yes. I want to say yes.
We're gonna say yes. So you and I agree on that right now. I remember listening to an interview that he did a long time ago where he's talking about like you can take your audience through the most horrible things, but as long as you make them laugh at the very end, they will enjoy it. And that is a very accurate way to both describe your original trilogy, and I would say definitely Joe Abercrombie as well, because definitely will take you through some rough stuff and then make you laugh about it.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
It's a good way to get that sugar with the medicine. So do you have a lot of experience with cozy fantasy before writing Upscaled? Like, did you read a lot of cozy fantasy beforehand?
I've actually not really read too much cozy fantasy. And I read Legends and Lattes when it first came out, because like everybody was, and that's really kind of what kicked off cozy fantasy, at least in recent years.
Yeah, it's like the grandmother of cozy.
Yeah, and I definitely not necessarily cozy, but I'll whenever I need a palate cleanser from like heftier books, I'll whip out like a Terry Pratchett book or something. And that's just kind of like a comfort read, not necessarily like a cozy fantasy read, but like a comfort read. And that was kind of what I was setting out to do. That, and yeah, Upscale can kind of be considered cozy, but at the end of the day, I wanted to be like a comfort read, just like a nice, easy breezy. Yeah, just like lean back and just enjoy that. Low stress, low stakes, like that. That's really what I set out to do. So yeah, but yeah, other than that, no, and not really a lot of cozy fantasy.
Okay.
In my repertoire.
Honestly, makes it more impressive that you then went out and went, you know what, I'm gonna just do this and see what happens, and just take a break from everything else.
Yeah, because at the end of the day, I don't want to do like the same thing over and over. I want to keep on attempting different things. So like went from like urban fantasy to grimdark historical fantasy to cozy to back to epic fantasy. I might do sci-fi at some point. I don't know.
You were talking about that earlier. You want breadth.
What's that?
Oh, sorry. I was saying you were talking about that earlier. Like you want to do a breadth of work. You want to show that you can do a wide range of things.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And just like have that range. And there's always like every once in a while, I'm just doing something completely unrelated, and it's like, oh hey, that might be a good idea for something. Like getting into it later, it might sound stupid, but it's like the broad strokes of it sound fun. So let's revisit this another time.
I assume you are like most other writers and authors that I've talked to. There is some document or piece of paper somewhere where you've just jotted around like a million half-baked ideas for future possible stories.
Not even like ideas. I have a full Google Doc just of titles. Because I I probably do things backwards where like I think of titles to things before I actually think of actual plot lines. Like that's really what happened with the Spellbinder series. I'm just gonna walk. I think I was like walking to I think I was like walking around in the city one day. I was like probably walking to my wife's place, like before, like back when we were still dating. Like,
Yeah.
and I remember just like walking around and just thinking, no, Spellbinders and Gunslingers. That sounds like it could be something. Like, I just like whipped out my phone, put it in my Google Doc, and it just kept walking. And then like maybe about like 6 months later, I actually started like actively think about what that series could actually be. And
Yeah.
then wrote a whole trilogy out of it. So, so yeah, no, I do have that, Google Doc just ready to go whenever I need a new idea. It's like, okay, what's this title gonna turn into, and then go from there.
Yeah. Yeah. That title though is like broad enough to give you a lot of possibility for a lot of things, but it also has a lot of flavor and crunch to it. So it really works for you. But I want to get into kind of what you brought up though, process in general for like, how do you tackle your books? Apparently you start with a title that you pulled back from 5-6 years ago. And then just wonder, but can you run through us like typically, so you have written, God, I guess about 5 or 6 books at this point. Do you have a steady process that you run through every one?
So it kind of depends on the depth and the complexity of the book. If there's going to be a full big series, like I need to outline literally everything, or at least like the major plot points of everything. Before I started the Spellbinder series, like I charted out the entire trilogy. So because I feel I need that to kind of like plant seeds like early on, like right in the beginning. Because like I just really can't function as like, a pantser. Like in in my day-to-day life, absolutely, I just kind of wing it, which drives my wife absolutely crazy. But but with writing, I definitely need some sort of outline to know where I'm going. But like the Spellbinder series, I outlined the entire trilogy, and the like the epic fantasy series that I'm starting on now. I think I mentioned earlier, I'm going to be in my head, it's going to be 8 books. I'm going to be outlining each book before I write a single word of the first book. But with Upscaled, I really didn't go with. I still outlined it chapter by chapter, but with none of the complexity that I really did for Spellbinders, because it wasn't really like a deep, complex story. Like it had themes that I wanted to explore, and and I still needed like some direction of where I was going to go. But at the end of the day, like that was a book where if I had charted everything out, I kind of like the humor wouldn't really feel natural. I kind of needed to be like in the moment of like, okay, what's something I can poke fun at right here, and a lot of the humor that came out of Upscaled really was just kind of like in the moment, kind of came out naturally, and then at that point I kind of had an idea of different things to call back to throughout the book. Like there's one character who in Upscaled who the running joke is he's just really, really tall, to the point that like, you never actually see his face, because it's always he just stands like, he's like in the doorway, but his face is like past is above the threshold of the door, and like whenever you see him throughout the book, there's always something blocking his face, just as a running gag. Or like another one was there's a smuggler in Upscaled, but there's a running gag of whenever it says smuggler, the text is just like crossed out and it says legitimate trader. And but those were things that I planned out in the outlining stage. That was just something that came out naturally while writing. It's like, oh, I can run with this. And that was really kind of the same for the Spellbinders series, where like different character details, those aren't something that really come out in an outlining stage. Those are just things that kind of come out naturally, and then I make a note of that to continue with that later on. So broad strokes, absolutely need to like outline it all right at the beginning. But the finer details, I find those are just so much. It's so much more natural to just have them come up like organically while writing.
No, that makes a lot of sense. I like the strategy where you go with plotting and you go with outlining for figuring out like, okay, what are my story beats? What is the plot of the story? What are the big picture things that happen? What am I building towards? But then when you're figuring out your characters, you can decide in the outline like, okay, this character in chapter 1 is going to find a dragon. But in writing that chapter, you really get to explore the flavor of that. Do they skip? Do they walk? Do they saunter? How do they get to where they're going is really fun to explore within the chapter. And I think that's something a lot of like hardcore pantsers don't really understand, is they're like, it's very restrictive, but there's also a lot of freedom in just knowing where the signposts are.
Right. And I could never be one of the writers that like when they're outlining chapters, like, okay, this chapter is going to be like 2,500 words, or this chapter is going to be 5,000. And it's like, I never set out a word count when I write either. Like I like for Upscaled, like I knew I wanted to be like a lower word count. I knew I wanted to be around like 50,000, but like that was like an outlier. Like the Spellbinder series, I just kind of wrote however many words I felt were necessary for each individual chapter, and the books wound up being like between like 140K to like 165K. So
Those are heavy.
Yeah, but still at the same time, not terribly long in the grand scheme of things with fantasy books, right? Like,
oh no.
But I never set out to write that many words. I was like, yeah, this could be like, I knew they were going to be past like 100K, but where they ended up from there, I had no idea. I just knew that, okay, this like book 2 is probably going to be a little longer than book 1. Book 3, I think it could be longer than book 2, and then getting deeper into it is like, oh, this could be much longer than book 2, and then at the end of the day, I want to be in like 6,000 words more. So
okay. Yeah, that's a skill that I do not understand, how people go like, all right, yeah, this will be about 1,000 words. I'm like, how do you know before you do it? I don't understand.
Yeah. And yeah, I think that's just something that kind of, once you like really know your own writing and have a good grasp on how many words you feel you need to get through a specific scene, then I think the rest, I think the predictions get a bit easier from there. So, for example, like in the Spellbinders books, like there were like, especially in the second and third books, there were massive battle sequences that I knew, because I would usually just do those over like 1 or 2 chapters. I knew that like a 3,000 word chapter, that wasn't going to cut it. And
yeah,
some of these chapters wound up being like the length of like a small novella, like around like 17,000 words, like in single chapters I wound up doing a couple times. But like that's just some like setting out. It's like, okay, I know what I want to do here. I know I'm going to need a lot of space to do it, so let's just go wild. Whereas on some like the smaller moments, like, okay, I don't really need to stretch this out. This can be a shorter, like more intimate scene, but it doesn't need to be like a 5,000 word chapter. It can be fine with just like 2,000 or 3,000 words, you know?
Yeah. Is that something you kind of figure out wholly on your own, or do you work with like a writing group or a critique partner as you're developing the story?
When I'm in the process of writing, I usually, like when I'm actually fully writing it, I usually do it solo. But I do have a really good friend who is like, whatever like the stage is, like before like even alpha phase, like he is like the he is like kind of like my go-to for basically like whenever I finish an outline for something, it's like, hey, what do you think of this idea? Does it sound stupid? Does it sound good? Should I just chuck it into the bin and do something else? And he and his wife have basically been like the encouragement like from like day zero for me as a writer. And they were really just there right from word one when I first started like pursuing creative writing. Um, and it's like they were my first fans or my favorite fans. And like they're the first two I always just go to with my initial ideas. Like the epic fantasy series that I've been working on. I've been talking about it to him for years now, and he is thrilled that I'm working on it now. So
that's fantastic.
So that's probably like the closest thing I have. I do have like a writing group, but not to the point of, not to the extent of just like that we like just like write in the same space together. It's more just like kind of like more like a support group than a let's all write together for an hour type of thing, you know.
No, it's nice finding that kind of community though, and like having that support and that like little cheer squad to be like, hey, keep doing the thing, because like writing can be very solitary and very, I don't want to say lonely, but yeah, kind of lonely at times.
It is definitely isolating. Like you, like there are definitely days where you feel that, okay, yeah, I'm gonna nail this. It's gonna be great. And then the next day is like, oh, this is shit. No one's gonna read this. Why am I even working on this? And that can be resolved just by like stepping away for a day and then just trying again the next day. I mean, that was me over the weekends. Like I was outlining this new series on Friday that maybe worked for about like 45 minutes or an hour on an outline, and then it's like, yeah, not feeling it tonight. See how I feel tomorrow. And then the next day I worked on it for like 8 hours. So
Wow.
So it was, so like there's going to be those days of like isolation where you're like, what's even the point? But like, really, you just have to go in with a fresh mind. And I just like went and did something else. I think I probably just made dinner, played video games or something. I don't know.
Yeah.
But it put me in a much better headspace to go at it again the next day.
Yeah, sometimes you just need a break to take a step back and really like change your routine, or just actually give yourself permission to relax, especially if you've been like pushing yourself hard and really getting into it. And even what you just said, that's a perfect example. Like you weren't feeling it that day, so you gave yourself permission to just relax, play video games, do what you want. And then the next day you pumped 5 or 8 hours into it. That's pretty good.
Yeah. And like, it's kind of like the double-edged sword of self-pub as well, where like you don't have deadlines imposed by anyone except for yourself. Yeah. Like there are days where like I know I should take advantage of the time that I have. Like this past weekend, my wife was away for the weekend, so I knew I was going to have nothing but free time to just kind of tackle some of this outline, and definitely made the most of a lot of time on Saturday and Sunday. And likewise, there were times like last year when I was wrapping up the outline for the Legion of the Lost. I was kind of giving myself a soft deadline to finish like by like the end of October, because I was getting married in November last year. So just like have that
get that off your plate.
Yeah, have that more just like have that full focus toward the wedding. My wife gave me a firmer deadline of the end of September. So, but and I wanted to finishing it like toward the beginning of September. So, having like kind of like that reinforcement of, okay, if I can do X by this date, I know it'll be great. But at the same time, it's like, oh, why did I set this deadline for myself? How can I do this by then? But it's just kind of being able to manage your own expectations, and like you said already, allowing yourself to step back when you need it, because if you're just going to be forcing yourself to do it, it's not going to be good. It's going to be worse off if you're making it feel more like an obligation than it being something that you genuinely enjoy doing.
No, I agree. And I think giving yourself a goal is huge, even if it's an unrealistic goal. Just having something to aim at in general, I find just makes me get more done. Like right now, I actually I'm gathering up my beta readers right now, and I'm aiming to have it in their hands at the end of the third draft by like mid-October, and just aiming for that just motivates me to know like, okay, there are people waiting for it. I have this date I'm trying to hit. So even if I'm not feeling it today, I can sit down and make some progress and then back away from it, recheck my head and do what I need to do so that I can hit it harder later when I am in a better position to do so. It all comes together.
Right. And like earlier this year, like I had like a timetable set for like Legion of the Lost. I was going to originally release back in April. Upscaled, I was originally going to release like toward the end of May, so I could enter it in Spiffbo. But then I was mentioning before we started recording, my wife and I suddenly had to move during the spring, and that just threw everything out of whack. And because I had already had these dates in mind, like I was dreading just making the announcement of I need to delay it because I need to be able to focus on moving right now. And it was like, this is going to be awful. Like people are going to call me Patrick Rothfuss or something. They're going to say I'm never going to release this book. And then everybody was just like, that's fine. Take the time for yourself that you need. Like, don't stress about it. Like, we will be here when it's ready. And it's just like, okay, but also I'm still going to stress about it. Yeah. But like, yeah, it's like knowing that, even like the expectations that you place upon yourself doesn't necessarily mean that's like the what everybody is expecting of you. Like the community aspect of it is like, it's like like the good people will recognize that, you know, like while you are an author, you're still human, and you're still human with obligations outside of this, especially where for most self-pub authors, this is really just kind of a side gig.
100%.
Life gets in the way, and people are usually quite respectful of that. So just like keeping that in mind too, and not stressing about when you don't meet your own personal deadlines. It doesn't mean that you're breaking like the deadlines of somebody who's waiting for the book.
Yeah,
especially if it's a dedicated fan. Like most of them will just wait as long as they need to wait.
Yeah, it's kind of like the double-edged sword, or one of the many double-edged swords of being self-published, is that you do have to create some kind of like publicly facing presence, and a lot of times you do need to be very public with like, this is where I'm at in the process, this is what I'm trying to do, these are my goals, because like you're trying to create that community, trying to get that outreach so that when you do finally finish the book, there are people that know you exist and know the book exists. So then when you hit those moments where like, hey, I need to pull back on this. I know I said I was going to do this and I'm really sorry and I feel horrible that I didn't, but I need to take care of this other thing. And so far, in my experience, and like what you were just saying, the community has been amazing for it. And just the writing community in general has blown me away. I've talked about it multiple times on the show, with just blind support for anything that I want to celebrate, big or small. Just advice, reaching out to people. Everyone is just so much more accessible. Like even for this episode right here, like I read your book a while ago. And I just reached out and I was like, hey, do you want to do this? And you're like, yeah, that sounds like a good idea. And I was pleasantly shocked and very happy.
Yeah. Well, I'm happy to be here.
Thank you.
Yeah, no, like for me personally, like you said, like once you're like a published author, now you are in the public space. And that's something that I'm still not fully comfortable with, because I'm a very, very introverted person. So just like, even just like taking the energy to like regularly tweet, it takes a lot out of me, because it's like, I have no idea what I'm even supposed to say. So here's a shit post. Like, and like, it's like, same with TikTok. I'm trying to get back on it lately just because Upscaled is something that's more palatable to book talk. And it's I also don't really want to show my face. I just feel so awkward just filming myself. And it was like, okay, here's my face for 2 seconds. Now look at the book instead.
But I 100% feel that.
Yeah, but it's like, I feel like with your debut, like after that comes out, it's almost like there's like a clock starts after that. Like you have all the time in the world to work on your first book. But once it's out, it's out. And then it's like, okay, now are you going to write another one? When's it coming out? And it's like, oh, crap. Maybe I shouldn't have done this. Maybe I should have just stayed in my hidey hole and kept all these to myself. But no, the community does make everything so much easier. Like all these different, all these uncharted waters, it makes it so much easier to navigate with the community surrounding us.
No, I definitely agree with that. And sorry if there was noise for a second there. I apparently decided to punch my mic on accident, but it worked out.
I do that purposefully all the time. So,
there you go. Just vent your frustrations out on it. But no, I definitely hear you on the whole like holding back on your debut novel and then having to like follow it up on a regular cadence, because you don't want to be known. I know we're like dragging his name through the mud right now, but you don't want to be known as Patrick Rothfuss or George R.R. Martin or anything like that. Like I think it was I just looked it up. It's Naomi Novik when she wrote the His Majesty's Dragon series. I'm pretty sure she self-published that when she started, and she just released them all at once. Like she wrote all of the whole series. It's like 5 or 6 books, and just went there, have at it. And just the patience that would go into that is just absolutely wild to me.
Yeah, like I remember, I think it was Brent Weeks with his first series, the Night Angel trilogy. I think they were all released like at the end of the same year, like book 1 month, book 2 the next, and book 3 the next.
Wild.
Yeah, which and that wasn't even self-pub either. That was like with like whatever publisher he was with. Like they just all released them all at once. So yeah, I guess he had them all set to go. So I guess why not, right? But and it's definitely hard to kind of like when like larger series have gone unfinished, it does kind of poison the well a little bit. So it like anytime that you start like a big series like I'm about to do, it is kind of a financial risk in a way, because there are a lot of people who are just going to say they'll wait until it's done. It's like, okay, well this series won't be done for years and years probably. Like I probably won't be able to maintain one a year with like the size these might be. I might be, but my real world obligations right now are not going to be the same like a few years down the line. Like I don't have kids right now, but I probably will in a few years. Like
I'm just going to change everything.
Yeah. And even just like when I was writing the Spellbinders series, even though it was just 3 books, it was like, oh, I'll wait till you're done. It was like, but it's almost done. You can read it now.
Yeah, it's an unfortunate disposition that a lot of people do have. I get it. I totally understand. It's like watching a movie and then someone turns it off in the middle and then you never get to watch the end of it. That is frustrating. I understand it, but it is a difficult dilemma that authors have to battle and cope with in their readership sometimes.
Yeah, and like especially like when you become an author yourself, you definitely become more sympathetic toward some of the struggles that certain authors have. Like Scott Lynch had like horrible mental health issues that really just led him to stop the Gentleman Bastard series for a number of years. He's finally getting back to it now, which excited to jump back into it because those books are great. And then same with Patrick Rothfuss. Like I know there are some like objectionable things he's done recently, but at the same time, he's still a guy who like went through significant mental health issues. I think he went through a divorce as well. So there were a lot of and on top of that, he's just like a huge perfectionist too. So like he wants to make sure every single word is correct, and to varying degrees, I like empathize with all of that. And minus the divorce, hopefully I never have to go through that. But
wives, we love you.
Yeah, very much, very much.
If you're listening. No, you're right. Just like you were saying earlier, at the end of the day, we just kind of have to remember that authors are human and they have real world problems just like everyone else.
Yeah, absolutely, for sure.
Well, I think on that heavy note, we're actually running out of time. But this is a good time to move it forward with, though. Please tell the people, where can they find you? Where can they find your books?
So you can find me on most social medias. Twitter and Instagram are usually where I'm lurking about the most. It's at Joe Lee. followed by 2 underscores. Find me on TikTok, Joseph John Lee, and then you can find my books on Amazon and wherever you can find your books. My books might be there. The Spellbinders and Gunslingers series is out and finished. Upscaled is the first in the Dragons of Nora duology that just came out in August. And the second book in that series, called Dragon Along, is going to be coming out early 2025.
Nice. And keep an eye out, because apparently we're going to be getting some kind of possibly 8-book-long epic from you someday. So that's very exciting as well.
Yeah, we'll see how that goes.
All right, folks, that is going to wrap it up for this episode of Author Adjacent. Thank you for hanging out with us today as we talked about Joseph John Lee's journey from writer to author and his latest book, Upscaled. Once again, I'm your host, Michael Vadney. For more Author Adjacent, you can follow me on X at Author Adjacent, or shoot me an email at authoradjacent@gmail.com with your burning questions, comments, or topic ideas. New episodes drop every other week, so stay tuned. Now remember, the journey from writer to author might be long, but until then, let's be author adjacent together.